September 12, 1683. Vienna trembles behind stone walls while Ottoman cannons thunder across the Danube plain. 150,000 Turkish soldiers stretch toward the horizon like a dark sea, their siege lines choking Europe's eastern gate. 70,000 Christian soldiers gather on distant hills, outnumbered more than 2 to 1. But numbers tell lies when the stakes reshape the world. This is the story of how a Polish king turned cavalry into lightning and broke the greatest siege in Ottoman history. To understand why 18 miles of horsemen could shatter an empire's dream, we must first see how close that dream came to swallowing Europe whole. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha commands this vast army with the confidence of 30 victories behind him. His engineers have already blown gaps in Vienna's outer defenses. His janissaries sharpen their blades for the final assault. The city's food runs low, its ammunition lower, and every dawn brings Ottoman trenches closer to the inner walls. The morning mist clings to the Kahlenberg Heights, where King Jan Sobieski of Poland watches smoke rise from the dying city below. For 2 centuries, the Ottoman Empire has devoured kingdoms like a fire-consuming dry grass. Constantinople fell, the Balkans bent the knee, and Hungarian plains became Turkish pastures. By 1683, Sultan Mehmed IV ruled from the gates of Vienna to the sands of Yemen, commanding the loyalty of 40 million souls and the world's most disciplined army. The numbers that chronicle this siege have grown fat with legend. Ottoman chroniclers boast of 300,000 warriors beneath the crescent banner. Christian pamphleteers shriek of 500,000 infidels at the gates. Modern historians count more carefully. Kara Mustafa likely commands 150,000 soldiers, including perhaps 15,000 elite janissaries and 40,000 irregular troops. Still massive, still terrifying, but human in scale. Vienna matters because geography made it matter. The Danube River flows like a highway into the heart of Europe, and Vienna guards its most crucial bend. Capture this city, and Ottoman armies could winter in Austrian valleys, then march toward the Rhine when spring returns. The Holy Roman Empire would crack along its eastern spine. France might celebrate, but Spain and Poland would face Turkish neighbors. Emperor Leopold I fled his capital when Ottoman scouts appeared on the horizon. The city's defense falls to Count Ernst Rudiger von Starhemberg and 12,000 soldiers who know they are fighting for more than stone walls and royal pride. But help rides from an unexpected direction. King Jan Sobieski of Poland has spent 15 years bleeding Ottoman armies along his eastern borders. When Vienna's messengers reach Warsaw, he sees not just a city under siege, but the last chance to stop Turkish expansion before it becomes unstoppable. The Holy League forms in desperate haste. Polish cavalry, German infantry, Austrian veterans, and a few thousand volunteers from across Catholic Europe begin the long march toward Vienna. 70,000 men answering a call that most expect will end in glorious death. They arrive to find the city's outer walls already breached and Ottoman banners flying 300 paces from the cathedral spires. July 14, 1683. Ottoman sappers detonate their first great mine beneath Vienna's Lobel bastion. Stone and earth fountain skyward, and when the dust settles, a gap yawns in the city's outer defenses like a broken tooth. The janissaries surge forward through the breach, their war cries echoing off the inner city's walls. Count Starhemberg's garrison fights like cornered wolves, but wolves cannot hold ground against the tide. Each Ottoman assault costs hundreds of Turkish lives, yet gains crucial yards. The defenders retreat from the outer fortifications to the inner ring, then from advanced positions to final strongholds. By August, Vienna's situation grows desperate in ways that maps cannot capture. The city's wells run low because Ottoman engineers have diverted the water sources. Bread becomes precious, then rare, then a memory. Civilians clutch rosaries and sharpen kitchen knives, knowing that janissaries show little mercy to those who resist too long. Starhemberg sends messenger after messenger through Ottoman lines, each carrying the same plea: if relief does not come within weeks, Vienna will fall. Some messengers slip through in the darkness. Others hang from Turkish gibbets as warnings to the next man brave enough to try. The Holy Roman Empire's other armies remain paralyzed by politics and distance. Bavaria's troops guard their own borders. French gold secretly encourages Ottoman success because a weakened Austria serves Louis XIV's ambitions. Venice offers prayers but little else. Then, in late August, writers bring word that transforms despair into desperate hope. Polish banners have been spotted on the Danube's northern banks. King John Sobieski approaches with his legendary cavalry and whatever German allies he could gather along the march. But can 70,000 relief troops break a siege that 150,000 Ottomans have spent 2 months perfecting? The mathematics of warfare rarely favor the side that arrives second to the battlefield. Inside Vienna's walls, church bells ring not in celebration but in warning. The Ottoman final assault may come before rescue can arrive. King John Sobieski of Poland carries scars from a dozen battles against Turkish armies, and each scar taught him that Ottoman power respects only superior force applied with perfect timing. At 54 years old, he commands the finest heavy cavalry in Europe, and the desperate loyalty of nobles who know their estates will burn if Vienna falls. The march to Vienna becomes a race against starvation and time. Sobieski's Polish winged hussars ride ahead of German foot soldiers who struggle through summer heat and Austrian mud. Supply wagons break down on mountain roads never meant for armies. Horses go lame, men fall sick, and every delayed hour means Vienna's defenders grow weaker behind their crumbling walls. Modern accounts often paint this relief effort as a grand crusade, but the reality walks on blistered feet and eats moldy bread. The Holy League armies gather piecemeal, not as a unified force. Duke Charles of Lorraine brings Austrian veterans who remember Turkish raids along their borders. Max Emanuel of Bavaria arrives with reluctant troops who would rather defend their own lands. Each contingent speaks different languages, follows different orders, and trusts different maps. Sobieski faces a nightmare of military coordination. How do you weld 70,000 men from 6 nations into a single weapon, capable of breaking the most successful siege army in the world? The Poles excel at cavalry charges but struggle with siege warfare. The Germans understand artillery but lack mobility. The Austrians know the local terrain but have already fled from the same enemy twice. August melts into September, and Ottoman trenches creep closer to Vienna's inner walls with each dawn. Kara Mustafa's engineers work through the nights, digging approach tunnels and planting mines beneath the city's final bastions. Turkish banners now fly within crossbow range of the cathedral. Inside Vienna, Count Starhemberg counts his remaining gunpowder by the handful and his effective soldiers by the 100. The city's food stores could last perhaps 2 weeks if the siege continues. 2 weeks to either rescue or surrender. On September 8th, Sobieski's scouts reach the Kahlenberg Heights and report what they see below: the largest Ottoman army ever assembled in Europe, spread across the Danube plain like a second city built of tents and siege engines. September 10th, 1683. King John Sobieski crests the Kahlenberg Ridge and sees the Ottoman host sprawled below like a living map of conquest. Turkish tents stretch beyond counting, their cooking fires twinkling in the morning haze. Supply trains snake toward the horizon, carrying fresh powder and provisions from distant provinces. This is not just an army, it is a portable empire confident in its own inevitable victory. But Sobieski sees something else in that vast encampment: overconfidence carved in geometric precision. Kara Mustafa has arranged his forces for siege warfare, not for defense against relief armies. The Ottoman lines face inward toward Vienna's walls, their backs exposed to the hills where 70,000 Christians now gather like storm clouds. The War Council that night reshapes European history in 4 hours of argument and calculation. Duke Charles of Lorraine favors a cautious approach, probing attacks to test Ottoman strength. Max Emanuel suggests waiting for additional reinforcements from Bavaria. The Austrian commanders want to coordinate with Vienna's garrison for a simultaneous assault. Sobieski listens to each plan, then speaks with the authority of a king who has never lost a cavalry engagement. The Ottomans expect a siege. He will give them a battlefield. They have positioned for defense against Vienna, not against the hills. Strike fast, strike with everything, and strike where they least expect the blow. The plan that emerges violates every rule of military caution. 18,000 Polish cavalry will charge in coordinated waves down the Kahlenberg slopes, supported by German and Austrian infantry advancing on their flanks. No reserves, no fallback positions, no careful probing attacks. Victory or annihilation decided in a single morning's work. Weather adds its own complications. September rains have turned the plain into treacherous footing for horses. Morning mist could blind the charge or provide perfect cover. The wind shifts constantly, carrying smoke from Ottoman campfires across the battlefield like moving curtains. On the night of September 11th, Sobieski writes to his queen, "Tomorrow we charge into history or into oblivion, but we charge as free men defending free lands." Dawn breaks clear and still. Perfect conditions for the largest cavalry charge the world has ever seen. September 12th dawns with deceptive calm across the Danube plain. Ottoman sentries light their morning fires and scan the hills through habit rather than alarm. Kara Mustafa has posted cavalry screens toward the Kahlenberg, but his main attention remains fixed on Vienna's crumbling walls, where the final assault will bring him victory in the Sultan's favor. Inside the Turkish camp, confidence runs as thick as morning coffee. Janissary officers sharpen their ceremonial daggers for the victory parade through Vienna's streets. Engineers load fresh powder charges for the mines that will breach the city's last bastions. Supply masters count the plunder wagons that will carry Austrian gold back to Constantinople. But that confidence carries a hidden cost. Ottoman armies excel at methodical siege warfare, not at rapid defensive adjustments. Kara Mustafa has arranged his forces for maximum pressure against Vienna, creating a formation powerful in one direction but vulnerable from others. His cavalry remains scattered in small detachments. His artillery points toward city walls, and his supply lines stretch unguarded toward the rear. 3 miles away on the Christian side, controlled chaos fills the pre-dawn hours. Sobieski's Polish cavalry don their famous wings, 18-foot spans of eagle and ostrich feathers that will create a sound like thunder when 18,000 horsemen charge together. German infantry check their pikes and muskets, knowing they must hold their ground when the Ottoman counterattack comes. Austrian gunners sight their cannons on Turkish positions, preparing to support the cavalry with covering fire. The logistics of coordinating 70,000 men from multiple nations would challenge any commander, but Sobieski has chosen speed over perfect organization. Better to attack with flawed timing than to delay while the enemy strengthens his position. Signal flags will coordinate the initial assault, then each unit fights according to its training and courage. At sunrise, Habsburg trumpets sound across the hills, not a call to arms but a declaration of intent. The largest cavalry charge in history begins its final preparations, while Ottoman sentries finally realize that the distant glitter on the Kahlenberg slopes reflects sunlight off 70,000 weapons pointed in their direction. The morning mist burns away, revealing 2 armies that will reshape the balance between east and west before the sun reaches its zenith. 11:30 in the morning, King John Sobieski raises his ceremonial mace above the Kahlenberg Ridge, and 18,000 Polish cavalry begin their descent toward the Danube plain like an avalanche given wings and steel. The winged hussars ride in the center, their feathers creating a sound like wind through a forest of giants. Croatian light horse sweep the flanks. German cavalry thunder on the wings, and behind them all, 50,000 infantry advance in disciplined lines. The ground trembles beneath this moving thunder. Ottoman sentries fire warning shots, then flee toward their own lines as the magnitude of what approaches becomes clear. This is not a raid or a probe. This is the entire Christian relief army committed to a single devastating blow. Kara Mustafa receives the first reports with disbelief, then growing alarm. Cavalry charges against prepared positions usually break like waves against stone, but these riders come in numbers that could overwhelm any static defense. Turkish drums beat the call to arms across miles of startled encampment. The Ottomans adapt with impressive speed, but adaptation takes time that Sobieski will not grant. Janissary units wheel around to face the new threat, their muskets loaded and ready. Turkish cavalry races from scattered positions to form a screen, but they number thousands against tens of thousands. artillery crews struggled to redirect their cannons from Vienna's walls toward the approaching storm. At 400 paces, Christian cavalry breaks into full gallop. The sound becomes overwhelming, thunder mixed with war cries in Polish, German, Hungarian, and Latin. Feathered wings catch the sunlight. Lance points glitter like stars, and the earth disappears beneath a moving carpet of horses and steel. At 200 paces, Ottoman muskets fire their first volley. Riders fall, horses scream, but the charge never wavers. The mathematics of momentum favor the side with the most weight moving at the highest speed, and 18,000 cavalry create momentum that cannot be stopped by scattered resistance. At 50 paces, Polish lances lower in perfect unison. The winged hussars strike the Ottoman lines like a hammer, blow that splits stone. Turkish cavalry crumbles. Infantry formations scatter, and what began as an organized defense becomes desperate flight. Then the second wave crashes home, and the third, until Ottoman resistance along the entire northern front collapses into chaos and retreat. The moment of impact reshapes the battlefield like an earthquake moving at the speed of horses. Polish lances punch through Ottoman formations, scattering janissary squares that had held firm against every previous assault. Turkish cavalry, outnumbered and caught off guard, breaks into individual fights for survival rather than coordinated defense. But this is not a story of easy victory crushing hopeless resistance. Ottoman soldiers are veterans of dozens of campaigns, and they know how to die expensively. Janissary officers rally their men around regimental banners, creating islands of resistance that force the Christian charge to flow around them like water around stones. Turkish artillery, finally repositioned, tears gaps in the advancing cavalry with canister shot that turns horses and riders into red mist. Individual acts of courage and terror unfold across miles of churning combat. A Polish hussar named Jerzy Lubomirski charges alone into a square of 50 janissaries, his winged shadow falling across them like a bird of prey. He dies with 17 wounds, but his sacrifice opens the gap that lets 200 riders pour through. On the opposite flank, a Turkish sipahi named Hassan holds a bridge against 30 German cavalry until his horse collapses from exhaustion and sword cuts. Kara Mustafa faces the nightmare of every siege commander, fighting 2 battles simultaneously with forces positioned for only one. His soldiers must defend against the relief army while maintaining pressure on Vienna's walls, dividing attention between threats from opposite directions. The siege lines that looked so formidable an hour ago now become a trap that prevents rapid redeployment. Vienna's defenders, hearing the thunder of cavalry and cannon from beyond their walls, launch their own desperate assault. Count Starhemberg leads his remaining soldiers against Ottoman trenches, attacking from inside while Sobieski strikes from without. The hammer meets the anvil, and Turkish positions begin to crumble under pressure from both directions. By noon, the largest cavalry charge in history has become the largest rout. Ottoman soldiers stream away from Vienna in every direction, abandoning their siege works, their artillery, and their dreams of European conquest. They are not fighting for glory anymore, they are fighting to reach the Danube alive. The siege that began with such confidence 3 months ago ends in a single morning's work. By 2 in the afternoon, the Ottoman army that had threatened to devour Europe dissolves into scattered fragments fleeing toward the Danube bridges. Kara Mustafa's great pavilion, where he had planned Vienna's conquest over morning coffee, stands, abandoned with maps still spread across silk cushions and the Grand Vizier's personal treasure chests left behind in the haste to escape. The rout becomes total when Turkish engineers, retreating in panic, fail to destroy their own siege works properly. Christian forces capture intact the very trenches and artillery positions that had brought Vienna to the edge of surrender. 87 Ottoman cannons fall into Polish and Austrian hands, along with supply trains carrying enough gunpowder and provisions to feed an army for months. But victory arrives limping, and its price stands beside it, refusing to leave. The cavalry charge that shattered Ottoman lines cost the Christian alliance nearly 3,000 dead and twice that number wounded. Polish casualties fall heaviest among the winged hussars, whose courage bought the breakthrough that saved Vienna. German infantry, advancing behind the cavalry, paid their own blood toll fighting through Ottoman rearguard actions. Count Starhemberg's garrison, emerging from their battered city, presents a sobering reminder of siege warfare's cost. Vienna's population has shrunk from 60,000 to perhaps 40,000 souls. Starvation, disease, and Ottoman bombardment claimed lives that no cavalry charge could restore. The city's outer defenses lie in ruins, its economy shattered, its people traumatized by months of terror. King John Sobieski rides through Vienna's streets to scenes that mix triumph with exhaustion. Citizens cheer their liberator while stepping over rubble from collapsed buildings. Church bells ring in celebration while gravediggers work overtime, burying the siege's victims. Victory tastes bitter when measured against its true cost. The Ottoman retreat continues for days, a stream of defeated soldiers trudging toward Hungary under autumn skies that promise an early winter. Kara Mustafa reaches Ottoman territory with perhaps half his original force intact, the rest scattered across Austrian countryside or buried beneath Vienna's walls. September 12, 1683, marks the day when Ottoman expansion into Europe ended, not with negotiation or gradual decline, but with 18,000 cavalry destroying an empire's dreams in a single morning's charge. How 70,000 Crusaders pulverized 150,000 Ottomans comes down to timing, terrain, and the courage to risk everything on a single throw of the dice. King John Sobieski understood that siege warfare creates vulnerability as well as strength. Ottoman forces positioned for maximum pressure against Vienna became unable to defend against attack from the opposite direction. The largest cavalry charge in history succeeded because it struck where the enemy least expected maximum force. Kara Mustafa had prepared for every contingency except the one that actually occurred, a coordinated assault by the largest relief army Europe could assemble. His confidence became his weakness when 18,000 Polish cavalry turned that weakness into catastrophe. But this victory redefined more than military tactics. It redefined what victory meant for both civilizations. The Ottoman Empire did not collapse at Vienna's gates, yet it never again threatened European heartlands with serious invasion. Turkish armies would win future battles, capture future cities, but the aura of inevitable expansion died on the Danube plain alongside Kara Mustafa's ambitions. For Christian Europe, Vienna's salvation proved that Ottoman power could be broken by unity and decisive action. The Holy League that saved Vienna became the template for future coalitions. Polish cavalry, German discipline, and Austrian determination, when properly coordinated, could match any force the Sultan could deploy. The battle's aftermath reveals victory's true complexity. Kara Mustafa paid for his failure with his life, executed by silk cord in Belgrade on the Sultan's orders. King John Sobieski returned to Poland as the savior of Christendom, yet died in debt because the campaign's cost nearly bankrupted his kingdom. Vienna rebuilt its walls stronger than before, but the trauma of the siege lingered in its citizens' memories for generations. This did not end Ottoman power, but it ended the idea that Ottoman power could march unopposed into the heart of Europe. The tide that had flowed westward for 2 centuries began its long retreat toward Constantinople, leaving Vienna as the high watermark of Turkish expansion. The mathematics of the charge remain staggering. 18,000 cavalry moving as one weapon across 3 miles of battlefield, creating momentum that no static defense could withstand. Every September 12th, church bells ring across Vienna at exactly 11:30 in the morning, the moment when Polish cavalry crested the Kahlenberg Heights and began their thunderous descent. It is a memory that refuses to fade, carved into stone monuments and whispered in family stories passed from grandfather to grandson. The Battle of Vienna became Europe's last crusade, the final time Christian armies united under religious banners to fight what they saw as a holy war. Future conflicts would be fought for territory, resources, and political advantage. But Vienna marked the end of an age when entire civilizations clashed over competing visions of divine will. King John Sobieski's victory created ripples that spread far beyond the Danube plain. Ottoman retreat from Vienna triggered a cascade of Christian advances across the Balkans. Hungarian rebels, inspired by Turkish defeat, rose against their Ottoman overlords. Venetian fleets renewed their attacks on Turkish positions in the Mediterranean. The psychological impact of Vienna's salvation proved as decisive as the military victory itself. Yet the siege's legacy carries darker threads woven through its triumph. Religious warfare, even in victory, leaves scars that persist long after the weapons fall silent. The same unity that saved Vienna would later fracture along national and sectarian lines, creating new conflicts as devastating as the ones it ended. Ottoman historians remember Vienna differently, as the moment when overconfidence destroyed careful strategy. Kara Mustafa's failure taught Turkish commanders that European resistance could not be dismissed as the desperate flailing of inferior civilizations. The lesson came too late to save the Grand Vizier's life, but it shaped Ottoman military thinking for the next century. Today, Vienna's streets bear names that echo the battle: Sobieski Platz, Polish Street, Kahlenberg Way. Coffee houses serve Turkish coffee, a reminder that some legacies transcend conquest and defeat. The croissant, legend claims, was invented to celebrate the crescent's retreat from Christian lands. The largest cavalry charge in history lasted less than an hour, but its echo continues 3 centuries later in every bell that rings to mark the moment when 70,000 soldiers changed the course of 2 civilizations.